Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EV Geek podcast, where we dive into the latest and greatest in the world of electric vehicles and sustainable energy. We're your hosts, Joel and Sebastian, and today we're going to be talking about V2X. What is it, how it works, and then what vehicles support it? Let's jump into the complicated V2X landscape. All right, so welcome back, everyone. Today I'm excited to talk about V2X. So V2X stands for Vehicle to Everything. I'm not quite sure how everything turned into an X, but I'll ignore it. Uh, but basically, it encompasses all sorts of methods of converting power from your EV's battery pack into energy that you can use for other devices, whether that be through built-in power outlets, like on an F-150 Lightning, of a truck bed, or allowing you to offload power directly from a vehicle's charge port, or just, anything in between. Unfortunately, V2X is kind of a complicated beast because, unlike a lot of things in the EV landscape, there is no standard for how it should operate. And it seems like every vehicle wants to handle it slightly differently. Just for example, the F-150 Lightning, the GM Ultium vehicles, and upcoming R1 V2H solutions offload DC power from the battery into an inverter that is installed at your electrical panel. And then that basically they're converting the DC power into AC, but on the home side. But because there is no real standard, the inverter system for the F-150 Lightning won't work with the inverter system for a GM vehicle, which won't work for the inverter system for the Rivian trucks, etc. Kind of a hot mess. And then the other way of doing V2H is to offload AC power directly from your charge port. Now, this usually results in a cheaper home install because really all you end up needing there is essentially a generator transfer switch. But that also means the hardware is all built into your vehicle, which means the vehicle price is probably maybe a little higher because of it. And then you also end up kind of limited on how much power you can output because, again, the inverter is now built into your car and it's up to the manufacturer to determine how much power they want to let you use. But, there's some vehicles that do the AC power, such as your eGMP cars. The Tesla Cybertruck is actually doing AC power, and I believe the Lucid Air does as well. So, Joel, you have an EV6. Did yours include the V2L adapter? And then have you ever used it?
So funny story. My did come with the V2L adapter, and I'll show it to you in a little bit. When I first bought the car 2 years ago, where I'm not going to say where I bought it from, but the salesperson tried to convince me that my V2L adapter was my charger, like to charge the vehicle. When I opened the trunk, I said, "Where's the charger?" He says, "There," and it was a case like this big. I'm like, "That's not my charger." He's like, "Yeah, it is. Open up and look." And at that time, I really didn't know a lot about vehicle load. I looked at it, I said, "No, this looks like something you plug it into." He's like, no, that's the charger. Then we picked up another part of the trunk, and I said, "No, that's the charger." So at that time, 2 years ago, a lot of people didn't know about vehicle load, and it's still something a lot of people don't know a lot about. A lot of people don't use it. So yes, my EV6 did come with vehicle to load. We do have solar at my house. So our house is solar. We did not do the batteries. So we do not have the power walls or anything like that, just the solar. So we're sending it back to the grid, doing the net metering. So to give you all a little perspective, this is what I got from Kia. So this is my vehicle to load adapter. So it has two ends. You'll see the one end here kind of pulls down, and that's where you would plug something into, extension cord, something like that. And we'll talk a little bit about what kind of extension cord should be rated to use stuff like this. That's where you can plug the extension cord into. I'm assuming you could plug a power strip in there or something like that. Close it back up. And then this part here is the actual part that you plug in to your charger. So this sits in your charger. This one comes out. The extension cord goes in here. Then we have a little button here to turn it off and on. So honestly, I've never used this. So reality is, before this podcast episode, I actually got out of the trunk, took it out. There's actually still had the sticker still wrapped around. I cut the stickers off and things like that. So I've never used it. What we've done, what I have done in the car before, is use the built-in 110 outlet to like plug a coffee pot into, I think, one time, just to see if it would work. So yeah, so vehicle to load. And the issue is, it is with price, if you want to do the full systems at your house, it is expensive. So I have not used it. I would like to go on a camping trip, which will be another podcast episode in the fall, where I take the car camping and I actually get to use this and see how well it works. But yeah, not yet, but hoping to.
Cool. Yeah, so that was going to be a follow up because I wasn't sure. I knew the Ioniq 5 has the power outlet kind of below the seat as well. I didn't know if the EV6 did too. So
So yeah, the
cool.
back seat, there's a power outlet below the middle of the back seat
Yeah.
that you can plug
Okay.
into as well too. Yeah.
Cool. So for me, I kind of think the V2H, which is vehicle to home, is one of the more interesting use cases because it kind of opens a path for every EV owner with a supported vehicle to basically have a giant battery backup for their home. But as you kind of alluded to, pricing is a hot mess
Mm-hmm.
for the systems right now. Just for example, in order to enable V2H with a GM Ultium vehicle, GM wants you to purchase their what they call the GM Energy V2H bundle, which pairs the GM Energy Power Shift Charger and the GM Energy V2H enablement kit. Whatever all that means.
Yep.
Anyway, MSRP on that kit is $7,300. And that's without install or anything. That's just for hardware. The Ford system I found where Motor Trend tried to do it, they were quoted $9,400 just to install the Ford Charge Station Pro and then the inverter that goes with it. Now, on the Lightning, you do actually have the ability to have a 30 amp 240 volt outlet and all this, so you could technically wire it kind of just like a generator where you would just go out and plug into like a transfer switch or whatever. But kind of the appeal of these V2H systems is, you get home, you plug your truck in or you plug your car in.
Mm-hmm.
If something happens to power, it just switches over automatically. You don't have to go out and then essentially start the generator or anything. It just does it. So, I mean, for me, that's pretty cool. But just kind of a final example, you have Tesla on the Cybertruck. Now, it's hard to nail down pricing on that because, and actually, Out of Spec just did a video where they talk about wiring their new home up for their Cybertruck to do power share, and they kind of get into this a little bit. But essentially, Tesla is including the hardware with the Foundation series, I believe, Cyber Beast trucks, and then they're providing you a $4,000 credit towards installation. Although when I look at their website now, it looks like they're just giving you $2,500. And I don't know if they still include the hardware, so that's a little shaky. But what they were finding on their install was it kind of looked like the companies, because, since Tesla's doing the credit, you have to install through a Tesla-approved installer. And it kind of looked like the companies are kind of inflating the prices to get make sure they're getting all of that $4,000 and then a little bit extra. Because I think theirs ended up being, they took the entirety of the $4,000 and then still charge them like $1,600 on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, just a little... But it is important to note that the Cybertruck, though, you can use the exact same gateway that a Powerwall has. So, for example, you said you had solar. If y'all had Powerwalls to go with it, and then you say ended up in a Cybertruck one day, you wouldn't need any extra hardware to enable power share, which is cool. Because a lot of people are in a situation now where they maybe have Powerwalls or Powerwalls and solar systems, and so if they buy a Cybertruck, or maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see the refresh Model Y also do V2H. They can just plug it in and it works. So, Joel, if you had an EV capable of doing the whole, full-blown V2H setup, do you think it would be worth the steep upfront cost to enable it?
I mean, this is one of the reasons I had trouble justifying adding the Powerwall. I mean, for me to add the Powerwall would have been another 35% cost to our solar. So, and the issue I have is kind of what you stated at the beginning, is that all these vehicles and all these installs don't talk to each other. So yeah, so if I buy a Powerwall, if I buy an install for like a Ford vehicle, I'm kind of committed to Ford then. So my next vehicle, if I want to use it, unless something changes, is kind of have to be a Ford. Same thing with GM, same things with Tesla and things like that. I mean, I got to make sure that I think for it to make sense to me, you have to be brand agnostic. I mean, it could be something that is installed, and no matter what EV I own, no matter what car I own, it just works. And I don't have to worry about it. Do I have to do any modifications to it and things like that? Because, I drive a Tesla, I drive an EV6. I'm not, brand loyalty. I would love to get an F-150. I'd love to get a Rivian. I'd love to get a Lucid. So, I mean, it would be hard for me to justify the upfront cost. And also, if I'm going to put that much up front, I want to know that that's going to be my forever home, or the home I'm living is my forever home. And as we get older, stuff like that, I don't want to dish out, some of these, look at these prices, $9,400, $1,000. $10,000. I mean, for some of these things, I don't know if I could justify that. And then in 4 or 5 years, I won't get that money back when I sell the house in 4 or 5 years. I won't get a
Right.
return on investment on that. So I think it's a great concept. I think it works. I think it's another alternative to, if you don't want to put a generator in your house, like for example, you could put a power wall or something like that, and then you could just get the electricity back and not to send it back to the grid. So yeah, for me it'd be a tough sell because I don't know if I would use it because I'm in a house that doesn't lose electricity either. So it's a new construction. All of our wires underground. I've lived here 5 years. We've probably lost electricity 2 or 3 times, and each one was probably 30 or 45 minutes the most time. So that's why it's hard for me to justify doing a VTH setup at my house.
So yeah, I'm kind of in the same mindset of, it's just really expensive, and you brought up, the whole they're they're not brand agnostic, and I forgot to even mention this before, but I mentioned that the new R1 is supposed to coming soon have V2H capability. It's not going to use the same system as the R2. The R2 is going to offload AC power, whereas R1 is going to offload DC power. So in theory, unless Rivian does some really complicated hardware, if you say owned an R1 and an R2, you wouldn't be able to use the same hardware to do V2H. Now, I guess if you own them both at the same time, I don't know why you would want that, but say you own an R1 now and in the future you want to buy an R2. Well, then if you just spent all this money to then, build out the system, you just have to rip it out. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it needs to be more standardized before I would really consider it, and then maybe price come down. Because especially, like you mentioned, we don't live in a new house. All of our power is aerial. We've been here 5 years, and I think I can count on maybe one hand the number of times we've had like a power outage longer than 30 minutes. It's, not a huge deal for, where we're at. Now, of course, we also get storms here, so that could change at any point. But we also live somewhere, though, that like natural gas is cheap. If you're going to spend 10 grand, do you want to spend 10 grand on a home inverter setup that only works for the vehicle you're currently driving and there's no guarantee it works again? Or do you spend that money on a Generac that is natural gas fed and
you put your charger hook to it in the box? So yeah.
I agree. It's kind of a tough. I think the technology is super cool, and I'm excited to see kind of how it advances and how the manufacturers maybe work to bring costs down and make it kind of more universal. But I just think right now it's a little too steep.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of these manufacturers are seeing what vehicle to load does, vehicle to home does, and they're just kind of rushing out to kind of do it. I mean, the same issue we had, years ago with charge ports. I mean, all cars didn't have the same charge ports. I mean, at one time you had cars with 3 different charge ports on them. So I think until we get some clarity around what everyone's doing, some norms around the EV community on charging, vehicle to home, vehicle to load, I just think it's a risky investment. So,
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode. We went on a technical dive into the world of V2X. Now I'd like to hear from you. Is V2X something you're excited to see on more and more EVs? Is the cost of V2H worth it? Let us know in the comments. And before y'all leave today, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tap the notification icon so you know when new episodes drop, and give a video a thumbs up. You can follow this podcast on X by searching @the EV Geek, and you can follow me, Sebastian, by searching @Kilowatt Station. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode. So long, everyone.